everybody, and welcome into today's podcast for Fox Sports Shoals Friday Night Football Live. And I'm here, my name is Mike Ezekiel. I'm here with Matt Suleski, my co-host. And of course, he's a Florida sports writer, and he's here with me today. We got Jaleesa in the studio filming today's podcast. You can check her out and Jimmy O on 97.9 FM for Fox Sports Shoals Friday Night Football Live on the radio. And of course, you can check out my blog at foxsportsshoals.com, and there's a lot of other good stuff there too. And today our special guest with us today is from the Franklin Times. He's a beat writer for Russellville High School football, and his name is Matt Wilson. Welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me in.
All right, Matt, and we want to start out. Of course, you're kind of the insider for Russellville. You know a lot of things about them, and you keep up with them. How's the team looking this year?
Going into the season, I don't know if anybody for the team actually, or coaching staff, or the community really expected for them to have the kind of success that they've had this season. They've got a first-year coach, and he brought in a whole new staff, kind of doing things a little bit differently. And this summer I talked to him and thought, this guy's got it together. And you just never can tell with high school kids. But they're sitting at 6-1 after this Friday. For the first half of the season, they were undefeated. So I'm sure right now they're just really enjoying this season. But as far as success goes, I don't know if they were really expecting this, but I'm sure they'll take it.
Yeah, and let's talk about Mark Heaton for a minute, the head coach at Russellville. He was at Haleyville last year, and he found a lot of success there, of course, in 4A Region 8. Now they moved over to Region 5, but Mark Heaton, he's found a lot of success there, and now carrying that over to Russellville. A lot of people, like you said, didn't expect them to be this good, but, man, they've just really had a great season with a lot of close wins in their region.
Yeah, sitting down and talking to him this summer, I could tell that he's got a lot of irons in the fire. He's all over the place. He's the AD. He's also the head football coach. But he's also, he's a real family man. From talking to him, I figured out he's a real religious man. And so he's pretty grounded in his approach to things and expectations. But at the same time, his expectations are high for all of his kids and players, and I think that translates over to the field and how they go about their business every week.
No doubt. The high expectations there, I think, really carried over for them having a successful season. Only one loss for Russellville to East Limestone, and their second place, Matt Suleski, in the region right now, and they're looking pretty good.
Yeah, they are. They're looking really good. It's so funny because I think the head coach from Russellville went on to Red Bay, and they're having a lot of success too, so it sounds like it's a good move all the way around. But, I want to ask you this, Matt. This week you guys beat West Point in a tight game, and West Point had one loss as well. And but before we get there, I'm going to backtrack a week with you. East Limestone, who's currently undefeated right now, and then you guys were both undefeated when you played, a week ago. Kind of talk about that game a little bit and kind of what happened there. Do you feel like you guys were just a little outmatched that game? It was only 21-14. Or do you think that East Limestone just made a few more plays?
Well, East Limestone, if you look at the week actually before they played Russellville, they put up a really sound production on the field against an Athens team, which, if you look at their record, doesn't look, fantastic, but everybody knows that Athens has a solid program, and they beat them 10-7, I believe it was. So going into that game, I'm pretty sure Russellville knew that they were up against probably their toughest game of the season. Obviously, it turned out to be that way. And on the field, the final score turned out, at 21-14. It looked a little bit closer than it probably was. At the line of scrimmage, running the ball, East Limestone controlled the tempo of the game from the time it started. And Russellville really had to scrap and kind of almost panic in a way in order to come back and make that an actual ball game. Overall, I think they just they got out coached maybe a little bit, and a lot of that may have had to do with the fact that Coach Heaton and his staff were having to console and help a lot of the kids on the team deal with a really bad injury to one of the team leaders and team captains in Austin Kitterman the weekend before. So, a lot of things changed for them over the course of a week. They beat Sparkman in a really good showing, and then one of their team captains and team leaders gets in a really bad injury, and he's fighting for his life. And now I think he's going to be okay, but he's going to be gone for the season. And so I think Coach Eaton and his players had to, kind of come back down to earth a little bit after such a hot start. And so I think they met a real buzzsaw in East Limestone, and a really well-coached team that ran the ball and controlled the tempo of the play. So I think, Russellville made some adjustments there in that game and made it closer ball game than it probably should have been score-wise. But they've got some things turned around now. Well,
and first off, I'd like to say, I know we, mentioned Austin's injury on the show before, and it's glad that, because I think his life was in question, and the fact that he is surviving, even though he's not going to be able to play football this year, much larger scale, he's alive, and we wish him much success in his recovery. Okay. But also, moving forward, like you said that, you guys lost by 7 and maybe the score was closer than the game. Well, this week I know we had a chance to kind of text a little bit on Friday after the Russellville-West Point game, and you mentioned that you guys won by 4, 26-22, but maybe this was kind of the same situation where they made the score a little closer than the game was. So kind of what did y'all do well this week? What did y'all get back to doing to kind of have a good game against West Point?
Well, if you look at the first half, I think it was it showed exactly how the game was. Russellville went into halftime down 9-6. They got an early long touchdown pass, which is pretty characteristic of Russellville's offense. They're really explosive at times, and then sometimes they stall out for a while. In the second half, I think Coach got them together and said, we've played a little sloppy this first half. Some penalties, a lot of mental mistakes in the first half that kept the game as close as it was. And they regrouped, and I talked to Coach, and he harped on the defense again, which has been that's the thing all season that Russellville has been able to count on is their defense, and it kept them in the ball game this week. They were playing kind of sloppy on offense, having some mental mistakes and offensive penalties that would stall out drives, and the defense would get out there and hold it together for them and give them a chance. And at one point they were down 22-13. And a team going through what Russellville has been going through for the past couple of weeks could have easily, on the road, packed it in and just, folded right there. But that's not Mark Eaton and his team. That's not what they do. And that offense, like I said, sometimes they get bogged down and they try and run their offense and it's, stalling out. But every once in a while, players like Dion Hill or Peyton Nichols or any of their receivers will just break out and have a big play, and that's what they do best is sit and wait and be patient and bide their time, and then when they've got a chance to make a big play, they do. And the second half showed that both on offense and defense. I think Cameron DeArmond ended up blocking 2 punts in that game. One of them was in the fourth quarter, which gave them the ball back, and then they made a big fourth down stop, which got them the ball back again, allowing them to score 2 touchdowns after those plays, which ended up getting them the win.
Right, and you talked about those playmakers, Dion Hill and Peyton Nichols, and we've seen those guys come out and play some good performances. And then, of course, West Point was kind of closer than we thought it would be. The last game they played, 26-22, and like you said earlier, they kind of came back down to earth. But they can keep it rolling into the playoffs. They look in good shape as we look at the 5A Region 8 standings for AHS. Let me try it again, Matt. Had trouble last week. AHSA8.
There you go.
Looking at their Class 5A Region 8 standings, Russellville right there in second place, right below East Limestone, and they're looking in good shape to beat West Point. Now they got Lawrence County, a team that's also right there in the mix for that fourth spot. So, what are the keys to a victory this week against Lawrence County?
Well, this will be their last home game. The front end of their season was really heavy with home games, and they've had to go on the road here lately. They'll actually play at home for their homecoming this week. So I think in front of Russellville, coming home after they had the vigil for Austin Kitterman, I believe was the last time that the community and the team has all met in the stadium. I think this will be a really emotional Friday night for them. It being homecoming and their last home game for the season before playoffs start. So I think that, Coach will have them ready and have them, back down to earth, ready to go to work like they do every week. But I think they'll ride that emotion and the solidarity behind the community. I think they'll ride that to a win against Lawrence County team that's okay. They're in the middle of the standings, but looking at Russellville's defense, at this point in time, I think it's going to be hard for anybody to really put up any yards against them unless they're just a juggernaut. And their offense, they're getting it figured out. You know, their quarterback is a sophomore, and I've talked to Coach Heaton about this a few times, and he has told me a few times, we don't even talk about him being a sophomore anymore. Now he's just our quarterback. And I think he has done a lot of growing up this season, just being a sophomore. You know, like Coach says, he's not a sophomore anymore. He's not playing like it. And when he has his head on his shoulders and he's in the game and playing consistent like he usually can, I think Russellville is tough to beat offensively.
Right, Russellville, great team this year. They've had a great start. Now they're 6-1 on the season, looking for a big win here against Lawrence County this week. And Matt, that should carry over into the playoffs pretty good. And I think Russellville's got a good chance to make a run in the playoffs.
Yeah, I do too. And before we let Matt go today, last thing I want to ask you, Matt, is just kind of since you followed them and you just kind of know the ins and outs of the program and where they do well and where they struggle, kind of what is your projection for them right now? How far do you think this team can go in the postseason?
Well, depending on how the season plays out, I expect them to win both their remaining region games, and they finish the season at Coleman, which I think would be a good tune-up for their their playoff run. Depending on who they end up matching up, and I've looked at some of the projections, and it's still kind of hard to tell right now. I expect them to win a first-round playoff game, especially if they somehow host the first-round playoff game. I expect them to win the first round. I could see them going deep into the playoffs. I don't know if this team and the program is ready to go very deep into the playoffs or make it to the Super 7 or whatever it's going to be this year. One of the big things about their team is they've got a handful of seniors, which are very vital to this transition year, having a new head coach and staff in there, and they're very important to the team. But Russellville has a really good crop of sophomore and juniors that are very important offensively and defensively for the team. And so I think if they can just get some experience in the playoffs this year, watch out next year, because they're going to have a lot of young players coming back next year. They'll have Nichols will be a junior at quarterback next year. Their tailbacks are sophomores and juniors, and a lot of their defensive players and stars are juniors. So, I expect them to maybe win a first round playoff game this year, and then next year I think could be a totally different story for them.
And we'll see how Russellville progresses towards the end of the season as we start to wrap it up here. Matt, of course, you're writing for the Franklin Times as the beat writer for Russellville football, and we appreciate you being on the show today and giving us a little insight to what Russellville's doing.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt.
Matt, we had a good conversation just then with Matt Wilson, the beat writer for Franklin Times and Russellville Insider. He did a great job of talking about Russellville, and I think I learned a lot more than I knew about them.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way. And I guess I actually thought they were a little better than they were. He kind of brought me back down to earth with them, because after they beat Sparkman, even though they're not great, a 7A team, and kind of handled them, I said, man, this team's really for real, and maybe even a real state contender. He kind of projects them to win maybe one playoff game, so he kind of sees a little more flaws than maybe I thought they had. But yeah, he seems to know his stuff about him, so it's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds going down the stretch.
Well, no doubt, yeah. And when they beat Dishler in the first game, that really caught my eye, because I didn't know how good they really were. But when they beat Dishler, I was like, wow, they might actually be better than we thought. So great improvement last year for them. But let's transition over to UNA, of course, because I had to miss high school football last week. I was out of town on a trip, and man, it was a business trip for UNA for sure. We won 27-6 over UNC Pembroke, and we are undefeated. And Matt, I learned this stat. Other than Faulkville Junior College, I think we're the only undefeated team in the state of Alabama. UNA.
Yeah, you told me that. I think Faulkner. It's not the Faulkner State. It's the Faulkner Eagles, who's an NAIA school. So it's not a junior college, because the Faulkner State.
But they're NAIA.
Yeah,
okay.
Not a JUCO, because Faulkner State doesn't have they don't have a football program. So it's the Faulkner Eagles of Montgomery, their NAIA program.
Let's see, well, what I heard, they were JV, Faulkner JV or something like that. And I think one of our players apparently is there now. Delvin Irvin, he's a cornerback. He used to play for UNA a couple years ago, and I think that's where he's at now. But apparently they're undefeated. So.
Who knows? I don't follow NAIA football.
But aside from that, Alabama and Auburn, they both have one loss now. So that makes UNA, as far as Division I, Division II, UNA is the only undefeated team left in the state. So.
Jacksonville State, they would be undefeated, but they lost to Michigan State, which, you can understand that. Troy, they've only won one game, and South Alabama's doing okay. And UAB, they're kind of in the middle there. So, UNA, man, they're just rolling along. West Alabama's got a couple losses. So
yeah, UNA's really rolling, and they're having a great season. Of course, the 27-6 win. It started out kind of slow. It's 10-6 at halftime, and of course, we're playing with our third-string quarterback, Jacob Thomas, who was, nonetheless impressive as a third-string quarterback, kind of filling in. He went 8 for 16 on his passes, 223 yards and a touchdown. So Jacob Thomas, good performance by him, stepping in for Wingo and Tucker.
Well, yeah, you look at that, man. That's that's almost 30 yards a catch. I mean, I think 8. Man, I can't do the math, but 30 would be 240. Needs a 223. So, about 28 yards in average there. 50%. Yeah, that's probably needs a little improvement. But I remember earlier in the season you mentioned that this guy's kind of an X factor, and I didn't think he'd play much, but he is playing due to injury. But you really talked about how he could contribute if necessary. And it seems like he did this weekend. Yeah,
now he has to contribute because you got 2 quarterbacks out. Of course, we traveled a few more quarterbacks, and they got a little bit of playing time. But Jacob played most of the snaps. He threw all the passes, and very good with the rollout, I believe. He's quick, and of course, they have a great defensive line at UNC. So it was hard to run a little bit, but Jacob did a great job under the circumstances, and he found a good target. And Delvon Carpenter caught him for 133 yards. So. And a 62-yard touchdown pass late in the third or fourth quarter. So, of course, I didn't know. I wasn't there for that part, but we'll get to that in a minute. But Jake did a good job and found Delvon. Delvon did good, and the offense did really good given the circumstances. Lamonte had almost 100 yards. Given the circumstances, very good offensive performance.
Yeah, it seemed like it was kind of a balanced rushing attack, and UNA is fortunate to have 3 really good running backs, and probably even more than that, but 3 that really play, and Taj Kimball, Diamond Simmons, and Lamonte Thompson. And I think Lamonte was around 82, and Diamond was about 49, and Taj had 38. So kind of a I wouldn't say running back by committee because that makes it out like you don't really have a good running back. I think UNA does have good running backs, but it's still kind of by committee. Everybody chips in. But I think the most impressive thing to me was they held UNC Pembroke to 89 yards rushing and just over 100 yards, 104 yards passing. So under 200 total yards of offense. They also got 2 interceptions. I know they led the GSC in turnover margin last year. I'm not sure if they led the nation, but they were way up there. And once again this year, they're just so high on the plus minus on the turnovers. They're way into the positive there. So kudos to that defense. Having a third string quarterback in there, they really stepped up and held Pembroke to 6 points and said, well, we're going to carry you guys today because coming up this week, they play Florida Tech, who's one of the most explosive offenses in the GSC. And the offense is going to have to be a little more productive if they plan on going on the road and getting a W. Yeah,
we really stressed that this week. We have a few injuries on offense. So it was a little tougher than we thought it'd be. And the defense really stepped up, held Pembroke to 2 field goals. And, man, it was a great performance by them. And Taylor Carney, who's possibly going to be our guest next week on the show, he had an interception on the second play of the game. And he's a defensive lineman, so that was big. And, a lot of good plays, a couple of interceptions that were big. C.J. Jackson got one of those, I believe. So, man, that was just a big defensive performance for them as well, holding them out of the end zone.
I think my favorite part of the game was, and I mean this in the most friendly way, our host here, Mike Ezekiel, he got so amped up during the game a little bit there about some equipment issues. He's one of the equipment managers on the football team. And before you know it, he's got some IVs in him, and he's in an ambulance getting checked out. So I don't know all the details. He told me a little bit, but Mike got a little amped up for the game, and so we're glad Mike's all right and back with us Monday.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm okay. I want to let everybody know that I'm okay. But man, we just had so many things happen. Coach Wisdom, the defensive line coach, he got hit on a play like somebody ran to the sideline, I believe, and hit him. And this was after I was in the ambulance, so I didn't really see much of that. But apparently, I think he had some problems. Like I think he might have had seized. I don't know. Wasn't sure, But Coach Wisdom's okay too, and of course, when you got coaches and managers and other people like getting hurt other than players, it's been rough. So I think we've all overcome a lot of adversity. Everybody's okay. We got the win, so that's the most important thing. That everybody's okay, and we're glad to hear that. And
the W is key there. I'm glad we got that.
Oh man, I got too amped up, but hey,
we're glad you're back.
Hey, but thank you, Matt. If we keep rolling like this, maybe I might need to stay off the sideline. I might be getting a little too excited. So, but hey, Matt, while we're talking about UNA, I wanted to talk about one more statistic. You was talking about running backs by committee, and we get a lot of weapons. Saying that, not exactly by committee, but a lot of weapons, and the offense in general has a lot of weapons. Coming into this game against Pembroke, We scored 24 touchdowns. It's 27 or so now, I think. But, 27 touchdowns now. But out of those 24 touchdowns we had coming into the game, 15 people scored those touchdowns.
Wow.
And that's an eyebrow raiser right there.
Absolutely. You don't see that very often. That just shows that UNA's got a lot of depth, and that if one guy goes down or whether he goes down or not, it just makes the defense have to cover a lot of guys. I mean, because anybody can do something. You can't kind of just bracket one guy or double one guy because everybody's capable on the field. And I think that's what makes UNA very special and unique. And if they can get healthy, they have a chance to really make a run. I know we've kind of joked about the march to Kansas City. That's where the national championship game is now being played in Division II. But it takes a lot of breaks, and it takes, when I say luck, I don't mean necessarily luck on the field. It takes luck not getting injuries, because injuries are part of football, especially at this level. It's just so physical. And I really hope they can get healthy. But if they are healthy, then they have a chance to really make something happen, because there's a lot of depth and there's a lot of playmakers.
Oh, yeah. I'm definitely looking for this team to roll and make a deep playoff run and possibly win a national championship. Number 5 in the country right now and rolling, man. We got Florida Tech next week. That's a big game. And all of our games from here on out are all conference games. We got Florida Tech, and we play West Georgia after that, I believe. And then, of course, we got Delta State, which is a huge game, and then Shorter and West Al to close out the season on the road. So
yeah, and Delta's, I believe they're 5-0 or 6-0 as well. They're undefeated, top 10. Their offense is so explosive. I didn't see the numbers this week, but I know their quarterback was averaging about 370 a game through the air. So they run that air raid attack, and then they're very tough. I think the biggest key for UNA is and I'm proud Jacob Thomas stepped in there and made some plays, and he's a young quarterback, and he's a very athletic guy. He's kind of a smaller guy, but I really think it looks like Jacob Tucker may not be able to go. I mean, he's got some real problems with his feet, and I know he's kind of deciding if he wants to kind of shut it down for the year, which seems to be the smarter thing. But his competitiveness, he wants to stay on the field. But I think he's got like two. He tried to explain it, 2 broken something in his feet. And
let me tell you something about that, Matt. Just they said I've heard people say that they've never seen anything like what Jacob has, and that just shows the personality of Jacob Tucker. We had him on the show, and he's just such a different person, and he prides himself on that. So. Like Lou Gehrig had his own disease named after him because nobody else had that, so they might have Jacob Tucker foot disorder. I mean, you never know. I know it's that crazy.
Well, he told me that after the doctor saw the injury, they're like within a couple of days they're having a conference somewhere in Tennessee talking about his injury. But he said, listen, you can't get the injury's not going to get worse if you play, but you're going to be in a lot of pain. And I don't know. If you're in that much pain, you probably can't be very successful in the field. Luke Wingo he's kind of in the steadiest arm, the steadiest quarterback, kind of, under center and the shotgun. I guess we don't go under center much, but we really need to get him healthy. If UNA wants to make a run, a lot of that's going to depend on number 12, and he needs to get healthy. So, he's got the shoulder issue, and he's kind of day to day, and he was questionable last week and didn't go. I think he's questionable again right now, but he's obviously got to get healthy. Don't throw him in the fire if he's not ready, but. UNA's success is going to hinge a lot on what Luke Wingo can do, because he's just so critical in that position for us. Yeah,
we had a lot of injuries on the offensive line, of course, at quarterback and other places, and we've had a lot of guys step in and having to improve their role, and then of course that stat about 15 people scoring, it just shows we got a lot of depth and a lot of weapons. So I look for UNA to do something big, and it was good to talk about them and get that win. And Florida Tech next week, a big game. Have to win that to have a chance to win the. That's a big game to win the conference right there. Florida Tech's very improved from what they were last season.
Absolutely. They got some real playmakers on that offense.
But, man, of course, as we move on, UNA looking good. But, of course, we're here to talk a little bit about high school football. And, of course, like I said, I was out of town, so I didn't get to watch a lot of it. But I did have Madison Academy in Lauderdale County streaming on my computer. So I watched a little bit of that game. Of course, Madison Academy won, but I watched a little bit of that, and I listened to the show on 97.9 FM, Fox Sports Shoals, Friday Night Football Live. Don't forget it. I listened to that on the internet. Of course, they got a Listen Live tab, and JD and Jimmy O did a great job, kept me updated, and I looked on Twitter as well, and that really kept me updated as well. So appreciate what they do for Fox Sports Shoals and Times Daily and others that keep up with the stores. So we appreciate that. But Matt, where were you at last week?
I was at Mars Hill. I think they were playing Tharptown. Tharptown had come in the game with a 1-5 record, and Mars Hill had the same. Mars Hill was winless in the region, and Tharptown had beat Cherokee in a pretty competitive football game, 9-3. So it was kind of a game I think both teams thought they could win, and Thorptown actually beat them 28-0, but the final score wasn't necessarily the final score wasn't as indicative as the game was, or the final outcome there. So I think that a few big plays by Thorptown kind of got them over the hump there. Marshall had 3 fumbles while they were driving. 2 of those fumbles were inside the red zone. Thorptown, I think, was the better team, and I think the better team did win. But Marshall looked a little stronger even at the line of scrimmage. Surprisingly, I didn't think that would happen. But a few big plays for Thorptown, showed a little more athleticism in the back end there, and just had a few big plays that Marshall couldn't get in the end zone. So 28-zip. It was by about the fourth quarter. It was time. You were ready to go.
No, yeah. I mean, they're looking a little better from what I've heard and what I've seen. So, we'll see how Marshall does. I believe they play Cherokee this week, so that'd be a big game for both of those teams looking for their first region win. But we'll get to that game in a little bit. But Matt, we talk about our predictions for last week. Of course, you got that game right and I got it wrong. I picked Marshall in the upset, and it didn't quite happen. But there was 4 other games that we picked different, and I believe I got all 4 of those right. I picked Muscle Shoals, and they got the win. Of course, they got a bye this week, but they got the win over Hartselle in a close game.
Decatur.
Did I say something?
You said Hartselle.
I said Hartselle. I was thinking about the week before last, but Muscle Shoals beat Decatur in a close game. I picked Brooks to beat Rogers. Of course, you took Rogers in that game, and Brooks got the win there. And then, Phil Campbell and Cherokee. I think you took Cherokee. I took Phil Campbell. And that was a close game. It was only 13-6, and Phil Campbell came out with the win. And then there was one more.
Sheffield over Colbert Heights.
Sheffield and Colbert Heights. Of course, you took Colbert Heights, and I took Sheffield. And Sheffield got the 33-21 win. So, it was a good week for me. I felt like I came back and.
I don't want to talk about it, man. I don't want to talk about it. I'm just kidding. Yeah, you did. You got me. I'd won a couple weeks in a row. I kept beating you by 1 game. So when you actually beat me, you just dominated me. It just kind of pounded me in the ground there, 4-1. So.
Well, Matt's a little sensitive on the subject right now, so we'll talk about that later. But I'm back in the good graces, so I'm happy about that. But this week we'll see what we got different, and it may be a little more fun, so we'll see. But like I said, Muscle Shoals is off this week. They had a big win over Decatur. Decatur, that was their first region loss. So, that shook things up a lot, and Muscle Shoals is looking really good right now.
Yeah, they are, man. They're really starting to kind of get it rolling, and I was high on them at the beginning, and they didn't look good, and then I said, well, they're not near as good as I thought. Now they're playing well, so I can't seem to figure this team out. If I say they're going to win, they lose. If I say they're going to lose, they win. So who knows? I can't figure this team out. But, yeah, I haven't got a chance to see them. I got to cover 2 of their games last year. This year I haven't had a chance to see them play. I read about them all the time, but so, I'd like to actually get a chance to watch them, so maybe that can kind of give me a little clearer insight.
Yeah, I haven't got to see much of Muscle Shoals either, but from what I've read and what I've heard from other people, they're looking they started slow, but now they're looking pretty good, and that win over Decatur put Decatur below Florence, and Florence is now first place. And while we're talking about Florence, they play Hartselle, so make sure I got that right. Muscle Shoals played Hartselle like a couple weeks ago, but now Florence plays Hartselle. And, of course, talking about Hartselle, they're 5-2 overall, and they're 2-2 in the region. So, they probably need this win to, they're fighting for their playoff life. They got a lot of people to compete with. And Florence is undefeated in the region, and they look like the favorite right now. They're the first place right now. They won over Athens last week, 42-7. Very impressive win for Florence, Matt. How do you see them doing this week against Hartselle?
Well, they're back at home. They're going to be at Bradley Stadium. Athens has been one of those teams that have played so many close games, and I did pick Florence last week, like 28-17, I think, and they ended up losing 42-7, or Florence ended up winning 42-7. Athens, they've been very competitive, but last week, at home, they just really kind of got it taken to them. I think it was 35-0 at halftime. It seemed like every time Florence touched the ball, it was a touchdown in the first half. Blake Hawkins had a big game pass, and I believe it was 15-19, 213. Through the air, and Roland Adams, as always, is just kind of keeping it going on the ground there. I think Florence is just the real deal. I think their only loss this year is against Starkville, who, I haven't kept up with Starkville since we talked about them, but, they were, at the time, they were number 1 ranked team in Mississippi. And
they had that season opening loss, of course, to Shades Valley as well. It was the number 3 team in the...
And in 6A or 7A?
6A.
6A?
So, yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, they got 2 losses, but both of those are out of region, and... obviously that Starkville team's really, really good, and Mississippi showing they're pretty good in football by their college teams this year. on the side note there, but
unfortunately, yeah.
But But yeah, I think Florence is going to keep it going. Hartsville, they're 5-2. They're 2-2 in the region. Hartsville's a good football team, and they'll be ready to go. I just think Florence has really found their rhythm on offense. Like I said, Hawkins was kind of been in and out of the lineup with some injuries, but he's back. He's entrenched as the starter right now. Roland Adams, and they also have some other guys that come in and contribute in the backfield. And I think they just have it going right now. And I think Hartsville, if the game was in Hartsville, maybe they have a chance. I'd still pick Florence. But at home, I expect Florence to win kind of, I don't know if I'd say going away, but 31-14.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say 34-17. I really think Florence is going to run away with this game. Not like really big of a blowout because Hartsville's a tough team. But if you look at common games, let's look at Coleman. Both teams have played Coleman. Florence played them earlier on. It was like 28-14. Hartsville played them last week and shut them out 28-0. So but if you look at it a different way, of course, Florence blew out Athens 42-7, and then Hartsville, of course, played Athens earlier on, and that was like 24-21, and Hartsville barely came away with a win. So, all these teams are so balanced in this. That's the most, arguably the most balanced Class 6A Region 8, probably the most balanced in the state. So, it's tough to win there, so anything could happen. But I like Florence 34-17. I think Florence will come away with a win. Roland Adams and Blake Hawkins and all those guys are big for them on offense, and defense has really been shutting down some opponents. They shut down Athens last week, it seemed like. And so.
Yeah, and what's that defensive player's name? Keaton Anderson?
Keaton Anderson.
Yeah, Tennessee commit.
Alabama.
His dad played at Tennessee.
He did. And he's committed to Alabama.
He's committed to Alabama. Yeah, he's tough in the middle there for them. He's a heck of a linebacker, so he's really helping that defense out a lot.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And, you got some other guys back there. The safety who's I think he's being looked at by some D1 guys, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
I like Florence in that game. Let's go back down to 5A. We talked about Russellville earlier. We had Matt Wilson on the show from Franklin Times. He's the beat writer for Russellville. And Russellville's got Lawrence County this week. Russellville came away with a big win over West Point, 26-22. Wasn't as impressive as people thought it would be. Of course, they thought it would be a little more. But West Point, of course, a tough team nonetheless. And Lawrence County right in there in the mix too. They got they're 5-2 overall, and they're 3-2 in the region. So them and Jo and West Point, or Jo Johnson and West Point, they're all fighting for position. Russellville's got second place right now, but they probably need to get this win. Matt, you see them getting it?
I do. I think Matt made a great point when he was on earlier with us. He talked about Austin. What's Austin's last name?
Kitterman.
Austin Kitterman. And first off, I'd just like to say, man, get well, buddy. We're all pulling for you, man, and. We hate about the tragic accident, but we're glad you're alive. And,
definitely pulling for you, Austin.
And we wish you the best, buddy. We
yes,
really
sir.
do. But, there were, like you said, man, when the last home game, that's kind of what Matt said. I'm kind of just piggybacking here a little bit. But, he talked about it. It was very emotional in that stadium. He had just been injured, and he didn't make any excuses. We're not going to say that's why they didn't beat East Limestone. Matt admitted East Limestone was probably the better football team. But this is their last home game of the year. It's homecoming. I think they're going to have some special little event to kind of celebrate Austin and his football career and his life there. And I think they're that losing their last game at home, coming back home for this one, kind of like a win-win for Austin type of game. They're going to be pumped up. This is nothing against Lawrence County. They're a good football team, and I know they're going to come in ready to go. But I just think the emotional atmosphere in Russellville, and they're really going to kind of play for Austin and not to mention trying to jockey for playoff position. And I think Russellville's going to come in, and I think they're going to win bigger than I would normally pick them because of circumstance. I'm going to go 35-7.
Yeah, I honestly think they're going to be really motivated to get that win. You're just talking about Austin. Of course, they're going to be playing for him hard, and we know that. And Russellville's been motivated. They started really hot, and, of course, they got that win over West Point last week. It really helped them. They beat some big teams this season, like Jo Johnson. Of course, they lost to East Limestone in a close game, but they're looking impressive with that one loss. And I really see them, like you said, surprisingly coming out and getting a big win. I'm going to say 42-21. I think Russellville's really going to pull away at homecoming, given the circumstances, as you said. Man, I really like Russellville, and we'll see how they do as the season goes along. But we move on. We're going to go to 4A for a minute. And we're going to talk about Deschler, who is undefeated in the region, 5-0. And they're going to play a Brooks team that's pretty much fighting for their playoff life now. And while we're talking about Brooks, that big win over Rogers last week, they're not really playing Brooks football that they have that reputation for. They're younger than they usually are and kind of now fighting for their playoff life. And if Central wins this week, that'll be a big matchup with Brooks and Central. for that possibly getting that playoff spot if everything works out the way it should. So Brooks should be motivated for this game. Brooks and Deschler, who do you like?
Well, Brooks beat Rogers last week, and the week before they beat
East Lawrence.
And so they've gotten back on track. 2 wins, like I said. Next week Central's really going to be a big game for that 4th playoff spot there. I mean, because it looks like Elkmont's right there 3rd. I mean, you never know how it's going to play out. It looks like Elkmont's 3rd. Deschler's 1, and Wilson's 2. After Wilson had a big win over their rival Central this past week, but Deschler's just too good in this game. Brooks is starting to get a little better, but I don't think this is Brooks' year. They're not the Brooks we're used to seeing. Deschler's just playing great football. I mean, they beat Elkmont, who's once again 3rd team in the region right now in 3rd place, 34-0. Wasn't even close. When they played Wilson, who's a really good team, it was close for a half, but Deschler pulled away and won by 20. I don't think Deschler has any problems. I think it's going to be big. I'm going to go 45-10.
45-10. I think I'm going to go 34-7. I like Deschler in this game. Deschler has always just had that reputation for being up there at the top, and of course playing in 3A last year, they still made the playoffs, but not as good as they usually do. But now back in 4A, they've really dominated this region. They beat the 2nd place team, Wilson, by 20 points, as you said. So, I mean, Deschler's looking really good. They got a lot of playmakers, and I really see them taking it to Brooks in this game, 34-7. We'll see how it goes, but Brooks, they're going to come out and fight. And Brooks, they always try to come out and fight, and they'll have a big game next week, and they'll have to definitely prepare for that game if they want to make the playoffs and continue that streak. They've made the playoffs every year since 1998, I believe it is. So, they know what's on the line. They're going to play this game hard, but I don't see them getting by Deschler this week. The next game we got on tap, couple teams that are also fighting for the playoff life. This will be an interesting game, in my opinion, Matt. Sheffield taking on Lexington. Of course, it's at Lexington. Both teams are 3-2 in the region, and they're tied with Colbert County for 3rd place. And of course, 2 of those teams will probably get in, and one of those will have to be left out between Sheffield, Lexington, and Colbert County. So they're going to be fighting for a playoff spot. And Sheffield won 33-21 last week over Colbert Heights. Lexington they lost last week to They lost to Colbert County. I'm getting my Lauderdale and Colbert's mixed up.
Counties mixed up here.
I keep going across the O'Neill Bridge there trying to get the counties right. Lexington lost to Colbert County 49-24 last week. So, that game could really go either way. Both teams need this win desperately, man. Who do you think gets it?
Well, I picked against Sheffield last week, and I don't like to pick against a team twice and get beat, but I'm going to pick against them again. They beat Colbert Heights, and they played a pretty good ball game, but I'm still not sold on Sheffield. I think Lexington, like we talked about, Dakota Saint, some of those other guys they really have some explosive offensive players, but since they moved up from 2A to 3A, where you see where they struggle is at the line of scrimmage. This past week, they played Colbert County. You mentioned they lost 49-24. They gave up 259 yards on 22 carries to Myron Smith, the running back from Colbert County, and obviously Myron Smith's a really great player, but that's just getting manhandled line of scrimmage. I mean, he was 6 yards down the field before anybody touched him half the time, and so Lexington's kind of showing moving up that they're just a little more physical at the next level. But Sheffield's also moved up. They were 2A last year too, so I think that Lexington's I think their athletes are going to be a little better in space, and that's going to be the difference there at home. Be a pretty competitive ball game, but I got a 31-21 Lexington.
Yeah, and actually, I'm going to have to go with you on that one. I'm going to have to go Lexington too. They got great playmakers, and they've really showed out. In the first half of the season, and now they're playing better competition, so it's kind of a struggle. But you got Wes Shirley right there, quarterback. He's been impressive. He scored in key situations. Like go back to Rogers a few weeks ago when he scored with less than a minute to go to win the game for him, and then Dakota Saint back there punt returning. A lot of weapons for Lexington. They got a young offensive line that's really stepped up. John McWilliams actually wrote a story about them in Times Daily. So, this team's looking really good, and the offensive line has stepped up. Even though being young, they've been impressive. In Sheffield, I can see them competing for a little while, but honestly, I like Lexington in a close game. I'm going to say 27-21. Lexington, great offensively, and their defense, I think, will hold off Sheffield enough to get the win. And then Sheffield next week will be really fighting for their playoff life against Colbert County. But I like Lexington and Colbert County to get in the playoffs. I really think those two teams are more impressive.
I do too.
All right, good deal.
Have they played each other yet?
They played the last game of the season.
Colbert County and Lexington?
No, yeah, they played last week. Colbert County won, 49-24.
Oh, well, I just talked about that.
Yeah, that's
I pulled one of your moves, Mike. I got confused there.
one of my moves. But Colbert County, they play Sheffield next week. Let me make sure I'm not getting confused. Colbert County.
That's what I was thinking. Colbert County plays Sheffield. Sorry.
Yeah, that'll be a big game for both of those teams. But
Sheffield played Colbert Heights.
Yeah,
and then Colbert County played Lexington. So
much.
So there's so many Colberts, and I got you.
All right, well we're good now. just so our listeners aren't confused, we don't want to lead anybody astray. Colbert Heights this week and Colbert County will play each other, and Lexington and Sheffield play, and those two will be really big games. Colbert Heights, though, they kind of got a slim chance now to get in. I think they have one region win, and they've lost some tough games, but their chances are slim to none. They did a lot of things to happen. They needed a few teams to lose and a few teams to win. And but Colbert County, they're 3-2 in the region. They've played their toughest part of the schedule, and they beat Lexington last week pretty handily. A pretty good team too. And Colbert County's they've been impressive over these past few games, offensively especially. The Qualls brothers, Tobias and Kiarve, if I'm saying that right, and then Tyler Jeffries, a quarterback. Colbert County's been very impressive on offense. I see them getting the win this week, Matt. What do you think's going to happen?
Well, Colbert Heights is kind of like Muscle Shoals for me as well. If I pick them to win, they don't win. If I pick them to lose, they do win. So, I'm not going to pick them this week, but really I don't think it mattered if I did or not. You mentioned they need a lot of things to happen to get back in the playoffs. What you have to do first off is you have to win your football games, and they're just too outmatched this week. As I mentioned earlier, we're talking about the Colbert County Lexington game. Myron Smith ran for 259 yards. I expect him to have another big game. I expect that whole offense to have a big game. I think it's going to be Colbert County, and I don't think it'll be very close. I'm going to go 48-7.
Yeah, I meant to mention Myron Smith. He's been impressive as far as running the ball and getting a lot of yards, and he's done that the past few games. And he was even big against Deschler. I think he led their offense in rushing and in total yards. But Colbert County, they have after their slow start against some tough teams, they got a big win over Tanner in their very first game, and you're like, well, Colbert County's going to be pretty good. And then they run into Lauderdale County and they lose 26-7. They run into Madison Academy and lose big. But Colbert County, they got a little bit of work to do. But Colbert County, I believe, will get the win this week. I think they'll carry that momentum next week against Sheffield, and they'll make the playoffs probably as the third seed if everything works out the way it should. I like Colbert County. And in this game specifically, I like them 34-0.
Yeah, I think you're right, Mike. I think it's going to be Madison Academy 1, Lauderdale County 2, Colbert County 3, and I think the Lexington Sheffield winner this week is going to be the 4th seed. So that game is really big. Yeah,
that game is huge for both of those teams. And then of course, if Sheffield loses that game as we predicted, of course they'll have to beat Colbert County. But Sheffield could definitely do it. I'm not going to count them out. But Colbert Heights, it's a slim chance for them, so we'll see how it goes in Region 3. But that's going to be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
As we move on, we got Rogers taking on Elkmont back in 4A. And Elkmont, of course, they lost last week to Deschler. They got shut out 34-0. But, of course, they looked impressive against Central the week before, 31-7. And Rogers, they've just kind of fallen off a little bit. Rogers, they started out pretty decent, but now they're 1-4 in the region, and they lost some games that they probably needed to win. But I think Rogers has a slim chance if they win out. But I don't really like them against Elkmont this week, Matt.
No, I don't either. I think Elkmont, I just think Deschler's that good. They beat Elkmont 34-0. I think Deschler's just the real deal and a real contender for the 4A state championship. Elkmont's coming back home. Rogers, they played a game with Brooks that would have kept them in playoff contention. And I actually picked Rogers last week, and the game wasn't very close, 52-24. Rogers made it somewhat close there in the third quarter, but too much Brooks. And I think, Elkmont beat Brooks earlier this season. Elkmont's coming back home. They need to win. I think they're going to make the playoffs this year. So I've got Elkmont in this game. I didn't write a score down for this one, but off the top of my head, I'll say 37-10.
37-10. I'm going to go Elkmont 28-0. I think Elkmont's got a great defense, and they showed that against Central. The defensive line was really huge, and Coach Holt talked about that when I talked to him against Central. I talked to him after the game. Defense has been impressive for Elkmont, and Rogers. The past couple of weeks, just that loss to West Limestone, I think really killed their confidence, and I think they were better than they were last year, but I don't see them making the playoffs like I did at the beginning of the season. So I like Elkmont in this game, 28-0. Wilson taking on East Lawrence. Wilson coming off a big win over Central. First time in 5 years they beat Central 35-9 this time around, and Wilson's looking impressive. They lost that one loss to Deschler, of course, puts them possibly in second place if they win out like they should. But East Lawrence, they're winless, and I really don't see them getting the win this week, Matt.
No, I don't either, Mike. I was at the Mars Hill Darktown game, but our guest on the show last week, Elliot Hacker, he's the PA guy for Central, but the game was at Wilson, but he was at Wilson, and I felt like I tracked that game better than I did my own because he sent me a text message. Seems like every play I told him to keep me posted, and he actually gave me the play-by-play. He did more than keep me posted. So I actually got just to hear a lot of what was happening in that game, and Central did a few good things, but Wilson was just the better football team, and they're the real deal. Because I've seen Central play a little bit, and I've seen them kind of practice. I haven't been to one of their games, but Wilson's just seems like the real deal. And East Lawrence, they're just not a very good football team. They lost 49-0 to West Limestone. I mean, West Limestone, in my opinion, is not near as good as Wilson is. So you have to. I'm sure if Wilson gets a big lead, they won't just completely rub it in their face. So it's kind of hard to throw a number out there, but. I'm going to say 63-6. I mean, they're going to score, and they're going to score often. I'm going to say they're going to get a backdoor touchdown when Wilson puts some ninth graders in the football game.
I think offense will outmatch. Wilson's offense is going to outmatch East Lawrence. I think the defense as well. I like them to get the shutout. I'm going to say 63-0. Wilson's been very impressive on both sides of the ball. They got a lot of seniors, and they've been used to getting beat. My senior year and the year after that, East Lawrence actually beat us in close games, and we had a couple bad seasons, but now, I'm talking about Wilson as a bystander, and I've really seen that team progress, and of course they're gonna get a big win over East Lawrence this week, I believe. And I said 63-0. Central taking on West Limestone in a big game for 4A Region 8, and Central, they're pretty much this might be a closer game than we thought at the beginning of the season because West Limestone's really came along. That big win over 49-0 over East Lawrence, and then last week they got the win over Rogers 23-10. So this team may be better than we thought because that's their first 2 wins of the season. But regardless, Central they've been a little down this year than they usually are with that loss to Elkmont and teams like that. But Central fighting for their playoff life as well, and they'll have to get that win against Brooks next week, which will be a big game. So Matt, Central or West Lawrence?
Well, West Limestone.
Oh, Central or West Limestone?
No, like you said, 2 or 3 weeks ago, it would have been a no-brainer. It would have been Central to be in that game. But West Limestone's really picked it up here. I think it's just gonna be a highly competitive game. And while I do think Central's a little bit better, they have made so many mistakes the last couple of games. I think they had 4 or 5 interceptions against Elkmont 2 weeks ago. They had some fumbles and some more interceptions this week against Wilson. And while I certainly give credit to Elkmont and Wilson for creating those turnovers, I think Central's making a lot of mistakes on their own. I think Central's going to continue to make mistakes. I think their offense, their quarterback's got a shoulder injury. I'm going to pick West Limestone in the upset here. Wow. I'm going to go 24-21 West Limestone. Wow,
and I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to say it's close, but I got Central 27-21. I think Central will do just enough to win. Like you said, they've made a lot of mistakes, and they lost to their rival. They're going to be upset about that. They lost to Wilson. They're going to come back out a little frustrated, and I think they're going to get the win over West Limestone, 27-21. It'll be a close game. They got to cut down on the mistakes a little bit, but I think now that they know that they're fighting for their playoff life, I think they'll get the win. We got a few more games to talk about. Lauderdale County taking on West Morgan. Doesn't really look like much. Lauderdale County's been impressive. West Morgan yet to win a game. Matt, you'll give an analysis on that.
Well, Lauderdale County, they lost. They lost to Madison Academy, and I don't know who struck first, but the first score I saw in that game was 10-7 Madison Academy at the end of the first quarter. And I'm thinking, okay, Lauderdale County, they really came to play. They got a chance here.
Yeah.
Coming into the game, they were only giving up an average of 8.8 points a game. So, they look like they would come out really strong. But Madison Academy is just so good. Obviously, we talked about Kerryon Johnston, who's a Auburn commit. And I saw the other day on ESPNU that he's ranked the number 3 athlete in the whole country.
Oh, yeah.
So,
he's that good.
He just really took over the game. And I think Madison Academy is that good. Because that's not to say Lauderdale County's not very good. They just ran into a buzzsaw. So, but they're coming back home. They're playing a team that's winless. They're frustrated. They need somebody to take the frustration out on. West Morgan's the team they're going to take it out on. I've got this game big, 66-0 Lauderdale County.
Matt, I'm going to go 70-0 because they scored the first touchdown of the game against Madison Academy. They had the lead for a few minutes, and then, of course, Madison Academy took over the game. But Lauderdale County, they're a great team. I think they'll go a little pretty deep in the playoffs. And, of course, they ran into Madison Academy, a good team. I like Lauderdale County big, 70-0. And West Morgan, they're still looking for their first win, so, maybe they'll get it down the road. Mars Hill and Cherokee, as we wrap it up, we got 2 more games. Mars Hill plays Cherokee. Both teams are winless there. I think both teams really need this win, and Mars Hill's only wins against Waterloo this season. Cherokee yet to find that win. Matt, who do you like?
Well, Mars Hill's Mars Hill's win was against Waterloo, who's a 1A team who's winless, and that was out of region. So, it's just hard to say. I picked Cherokee last week. They only lost 13-6. But they got outgained by Phil Kimball, 218 to 4 yards. So it took a lot of breaks to keep that game as close as it was. Cherokee, like I mentioned before, they're so weak up front. But they do have a couple skill guys, and I think their skill guys may be a little better than Mars Hill. But I think Mars Hill is going to win that battle up front. So this game is just going to be really, really close. I think Mars Hill got that one win over Waterloo. That's going to be their one win of the season. Cherokee was close last week, probably closer than they should have been. I'm going to go Cherokee in this game, 13-10.
Wow, that's close. And Matt, I'm going to go Cherokee too. I think they're really looking for that first win, and they're probably thinking right now, I don't want this first-year team to beat us. And of course, Phil Campbell kind of handled Mars Hill a little more than they did Cherokee. I think Cherokee kept it a little closer, but like you said, the yardage difference was kind of bad. So Cherokee's going to be frustrated. I think they'll get that first win. Chris Stanley on offense, he's going to have a big game in that game, I believe. So I'm going to go 14-13. I'm going to say it's a field goal difference there, or an extra point difference. I'm going to say Cherokee gets the win. And last game, as we wrap it up, Shoals Christian taking on Waterloo. Shoals Christian winless, Waterloo winless. Shoals Christian had a bye last week. And Waterloo, of course, they lost 58-0 against Phillips. And the week before, Shoals Christian played Phillips and lost 52-24. So, comparatively speaking there, it looks like Shoals Christian has a little better offensive, or they look a little better offensively. They've progressed along the season and gotten a little better. Waterloo hadn't really gotten better as the seasons went along. They've actually probably gotten worse. Matt, how do you like?
Well, as I mentioned last week on the show, even though Shoals Christian's 0-7, they have progressively gotten better. I was at that Phillips game, and they had some chances. I don't think they would have won the game, but they had chances in the red zone where they didn't even score, and they lost 52-24. So Waterloo, as we talked about them a few times, they're just not very good. I don't see them winning the football game this year. Shoals Christian, I actually think, will win their last 3 football games this year. They play Waterloo, Vina, and Mars Hill. I expect them to run that gauntlet, go 3-0 there. So I'm going to pick them this week. I'm going to pick them big. All these games where they've been competing, they've had a lot of close losses. This is the game. They don't just win their first game; they win, and they win convincingly. I'm going to say 49-0.
Wow. Okay. And but don't forget, Waterloo is at home, and you like home field advantage. You like talking about that. I'm going to keep it a little closer, but not by much. I'll say 35-0. I like Shoals Christian to get better as they went along. As we talked about, Tanner Bozeman at quarterback, he's gotten better. Dale Thomas, another skill guy they have at wideout. Shoals Christian, I think on defense has even gotten a little better.
They have.
And
they've really gotten a lot tougher.
Oh, no doubt, and they're physical. So, I like this team to get the win over Waterloo, and they may win those next 3 games as you talked about, and we'll get to those in a little bit. Vina, a little better than Waterloo, of course, but we'll get to that. But Shoals Christian's gotten a lot better. And Matt, as we wrap it up, I think we just picked one game different, didn't we? I think you picked West Limestone to beat Central. Of course, I took Central. I think that's the only one, though, right?
That's it.
All right. Well, as we wrap it up, I want to thank Matt Wilson for being on the show today from Russellville, or the Russellville Insider and the Franklin Times beat writer for them. And we appreciate him being on the show and giving us a little Russellville insight to their season. Of course, we got Jaleesa in the studio with us, and she's producing and filming. Appreciate Jaleesa. And, of course, you can check her and Jimmy O out on 97.9 FM for all your high school need. And that's from 5 to 7 on Friday night and from 9 to 11 for the post-game show. And they do a very good job keeping you updated, so check them out. Also, check out the blog on foxsportsshoals.com. You can read my blog, and I do a recap on Tuesday, and we'll do predictions on Thursday. And you can see me and Matt's picks there and a little in-depth on that. leave a comment on the podcast, because obviously you might think we don't know what we're talking about. So tell us what you think. Let us know what you think. We want to hear from y'all. And for Matt Suleski, my co-host, Mike Ezekiel, thank you for listening in today.